Hello to everybody, and thanks to you and to Claudio for this great seminario. And the title of the subject of my speech is about the basso continuo instrumentation and dosage in Vivaldi's music. A subject which is also treated in my book you named now. We all who love and play and perform Baroque music, especially late Baroque music, have the problem with the lack of direct verbal indications and instructions in treatises or theoretical writings, and so we must rely greatly on what is written in scores or what is expressed in scores. And I think it's logical to rely especially on composers who are very precise and accurate in their terminological and general writing of their music. And one of them is certainly Vivaldi, very precise composer and copyist of his music. And you might be, I will share my, I hope that works. Yes, you see it now.
Yes, we do.
A composer who writes instructions as this for the instrumentation, with the mutes for the violins, one double bass, Violone is for Vivaldi, always double bass, with a bow, violas and the other basses pizzicati, and without harpsichord. I think this is a good testimonial for our questions on performing praxis. And so I had a look to all, I mean all, autographs by Vivaldi and by his copyist, he survived, looking for instructions for exactly the instrumentation of basso continuo. And I found answers to some important questions of the instrumentation. And I think some of these answers are in contrast with what we are doing and performing nowadays. The questions are these 5 mainly. Which instruments he used? Are the instruments doubled or not? And when Vivaldi wants some different instrumentation for piano, which instruments he prefers? And the same for the solo, which instruments are to accompany a solo, vocal or instrument solo. Last and important question also, are chords in Vivaldi's music, and generally, I would say, in Baroque music, so mandatory as we think sometimes today? So we begin with the first question: which instruments? At first, I have a list, which the instruments who plays who are explicitly indicated to play the bass line by Vivaldi, normally harpsichord, organ, cello, violone, double bass, violins and violas, because Vivaldi likes very much the so-called bassetto, where the high instruments play the bass. And bassoon. Rarely used is lute, theorbo, chalumeau, clarinets, and viola all'inglese, which is the viola da gamba or something very similar. And now you might ask, where are used which instruments? To begin with vocal, sacred vocal music. Yeah, obviously the organ and the string instruments, no bassoon and no special instruments. So they are never named by underline again, I'm speaking about instructions, written instructions I found in the music. The only exception of sacred music is oratorio, not liturgical. We have Judita Triumphans, where you can find the harpsichord too, and also the so-called rare instruments, chalumeau, clarinet, and viola inglese, to do a bass line also. This is because this oratorio is for La Pietà, where Vivaldi had a lot of players of the most strange instruments. Then operas and serenatas, stage music, obviously harpsichord, string instruments, and bassoon. The great absent here and above are the finger-plucked instruments, mute and theorbo. In the whole operas we have, by Vivaldi, we never find a hint to a lute or a theorbo. That's a pity. We have such a good theorbo player in our group, a very kind person, but that's a fact. Cantatas also, very few situations, normal harpsichord and strings, and then instrumental music. With orchestra, you find both harpsichord and organ. You find once the lute and once the theorbo, string instruments, high and low string instruments, bassoon very often, and also the chalumeau and the clarinet. And in the chamber music, the sonatas have almost no indication. Once is named the organ, and very often the bassoon does alone the bass line. The bassoon may be named in the chamber concerts by Vivaldi as a solo instrument, but indeed he plays the bass line, a true normal bass line, not a solo part, what would call a solo part. The cello is named only as a substitute of the bassoon in some concerts, chamber concerts, which are transcribed for strings. Second question, singular or plural? So are these instruments doubled or not? And here I give some example. For instance, you find here in Catoni Nutica, violini, plural, violette, plural, violas. Senza cim, it's abbreviated, we don't know, but later in the same piece we find this indication. So Cembali, plural, but double bass and cello, singular. Violone e violoncello. More examples. Tutti, it means the violins, unisoni, violette, plural, cembali, plural, but string, basses, singular. This is a concert. But there are also, this is the more normal situation with everything doubled, but the bass strings. But we have also some exception. For example, this is again from Judita, and you see it's dilated, but it doesn't change the information on the doubling. Violoni and violoncelli without harpsichord one. This is again maybe especially for the situation alla Pietà, where Vivaldi had a big and good group of double bass and cello players. To the third question. So I repeat, normally Vivaldi writes a piano and there's no special instruction for the instrumentation, but sometimes he does it. And so when he does, which instruments he prefers, which kind combination of instruments. Some example, this is a string concert, second slow movement, which is sempre piano, so the whole movement is piano, and it's senza cembali, without harpsichord. And again, on a different string concert with a pianissimo, some pianissimo bars, and there also you read senza cembali. And with the forte, again, tutti. So harpsichord plays. And this is nice to see the Vivaldi who changes mind, because at this piano, in a violin concert, in this piano, he wrote first tasto solo, and then evidently it was not enough piano, so he delayed it and wrote by his own hand senza cembali. So really, for the piano, no harpsichord. This is for sacred music, so with organ, double choir, disposition of the orchestra, and this is all piano sempre, the whole aria, without oboes, pianissimo sempre, and both organs have senza organo, both choirs without organ. And the last example what gave the title to my speech, Violone e Violoncello, piano senza cembali. So to sum up, the normal choice, Vivaldi's choice for a piano is without keyboard instrument. And I think we should learn this from Vivaldi. He does not say to the violone to do a touch. He doesn't ask the touch to the double bass, but to the keyboard instrument. Evidently, the string players, his string players, bass string players, were able to play very piano. Same question for the solo. Again, normally there's no special instruction for the solo accompaniment, but when we find them, what is the preferred Vivaldi's choice? For example, this is an aria from Tito Manlio, begins with a normal string tutti, and at the second line, the solo singer begins, il cuore ingrato, and the instruction for the bass is violoncello solo. This violoncello solo, somebody of yours may think, does it mean only one of the cello group, only one player of the bigger cello group, and all the rest, harpsichord, lute, whatever you think? Or does it mean only violoncello? And the answer by Vivaldi himself is only one violoncello. Because when he asks for one of the group, what he does for the violins sometimes, he always writes un solo violino, one only violin, which is in Italian indeed correct, to mean only one of the many violins. Violoncello solo means really only one player, nobody more, no other instrument. More examples for solos. this is an aria from the same opera given at Mantua, in Vivaldi's Mantua period. An aria with a very nice violoncello solo obbligato part, alto, and accompanied by violone solo. Going ahead, this is an example for the situation of a chamber concert. You see the bassoon has a line as if it was a soloist in this concert. And now observe very attentively, you see the flute and oboe. The oboe has to play ut sopra with the flute and has no pauses in the part because he's not pausing. He has to play with the flute. The violin con basso, so he has to play the bass, octave higher, obviously. Bassoon is so obvious he has to play the bass, he doesn't even write it. And everybody has no pauses but empty staves. And then the first tutti is finished in the middle of the second line. And you find in the bassoon part, the last note of the basso. And then what you see is a bass line. That is not a solo part. The solo part is for the recorder. And the bassoon does the accompaniment. And now you see in the bass line, the pauses. To be sure, the bass has not to play with the bassoon. It's really only the bassoon. Oh, here again is a very special cello concert in E minor, which begins with an adagio, and you see bassoon alone to accompany the beginning of the cello solo part. And this is what I said before, the bassetto situation. So the violins and violas who play the bass. And if you are used to play Vivaldi from modern editions, it's a good idea to have a look to this special disposition to understand Vivaldi's mentality, who really conceived this bassetto as a bass, because you see the violin has first the violin clef, default, and then the bass clef. And the B in the first bar here means play the bass. And so the second violin and the viola has an alto clef and then bass clef. Written, and what is written there is a bass line. They have to play it unisono. So it's really obviously an octave higher because it goes below the range of these instruments. But Vivaldi writes it as bass, in bass range. And this is here for to accompany the B part, which is only for the singer. So to sum up, you see often an accompaniment of only one instrument. We have seen bassoon alone, cello alone, and the bassito with all the instruments unisono. This is a very frequent situation. More rare is double bass alone, and this is more for and only for low instruments or low singers. Organ, once cello and violas, and sometimes also cembalo, senza cembalo, so all except harpsichord or senza organ. With the thing we find only once and in very special situations is harpsichord alone, which might seem to somebody a normal choice for a solo. It's used only to accompany the four theorbos in the Judita Triumphans. and also obviously Chalumeau and Viola da Gamba, that's all linked to some special situation. What we find never is harpsichord and cello. And I think it's for many of us, if not all of us, the default choice for a solo. I am battling also with my group to let the double bass player continue in the solos. Vivaldi never, if not once in 2 bars, there's an overlapping of 2 situations, a little strange situations. Otherwise, he never asked this combination of harpsichord and cello, and he never asked for the double bass to do it, touch it, if not for more instruments. So you may object and think that this is never written because the double bass player does it normally without saying. He knows he has to do a touch it. Always he finds a piano or he finds a solo. And here I have an example, one of the very rare separate parts we have conserved, which are written half by Vivaldi himself and half by his copyist. And we have, for example, one aria for alto and basso continuo only, and the 3 parts for organ, cello, and double bass, as you can see here, are perfectly identical. So I don't think a copyist, poor man, would have written the whole part of the double bass if it was normal that the double bass has a touch it. And by the way, the double bass plays also the few notes in tenor clef. Now let's go on. I did also a confrontation between instruments which soloist here accompanies, but I fear we have not so much time now. And so I go on to my last question. I had answers by Vivaldi too. And because I fear we all are a little too fixed to the idea that Baroque music is music with realized basso continuo chords. So when I was a little girl, I learned the Baroque era is the Generalbasszeitalter, the era of the thrower bass. And so it's difficult to change mind and think something without chordal instruments. But we have to, if we want to follow Vivaldi's instructions. The many situations without chordal instruments are, for example, as we said, this second movement of a chamber concert, flauto solo who does the melody, and bassoon who does a typical bass line, something as an ostinato bass line. Fagotto, solo, stop. This is again from the separate parts from Nisi Dominus, whole piece, organ, tasto solo. And if you want, you can snuff tobacco with this right hand. It's a long, long aria. And again, many places, tasto solo, especially almost always on pedals. And as you see, they can be really long. Again, we had already a look to this page, the many bassetto. And if you see the basso with the pauses, you must deplore that often in modern recordings or concerts by our dear colleagues, lutists, this bassetto is used for a great lute arpeggio solo. It is against it's against what Vivaldi expressly asked for. And again, we had already a look to this page, Violoncello solo. So here, one word more, because recently in our times, it's a great new fashion to do basso continuo realizations with a cello. And this fashion is based mainly, if not totally, on sources from the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, when cellists used to do chords in Italian operas recitativi. But Vivaldi is not from the end of the 18th century. And Vivaldi uses the chords on the cello very, very, very rarely. 2 chords in the concerts, 3 in 1 in the sonatas, and 4 in a trio. For Vivaldi, the cello is not a chordal instrument, to the very opposite of the viola all'inglese, the viola da gamba. This is the recitative from Incoronazione di Dario for viola all'inglese, where the viola da gamba does a complete realization of the basso continuo. But the cello does not, and I found not only in Vivaldi's music, but in the whole time, no hint, including Handel's music, to a cello realizing chords. So if we have, as a conclusion, a look to the many situations where Vivaldi asked for the absence of chords, I think we should have more respect for this. And it's not a case or something he forgot, but it's really a very good thing for the clearness and lightness of Vivaldi's music. And so I have finished.